If a stranger in a coffee shop asked you, "When has God shown up in your life?" you might find the question a little odd. But if you paused, chances are you'd have a story to tell. At St. Mark's, we believe God is at work everywhere, and everyone has a God encounter story. Inspired by StoryCorps, this Lent we're introducing GodCorps, an opportunity to record a short interview and share an experience of God at work in your life. We'd love to hear your story.
It's Jen Beal with Jan Burrell again, and we are here for part 2 of her story because there's just so much to hear, and we're going to keep going. We're going to hear now, I think last time we left off...
When I transferred from Augustana to
yes.
Western Illinois.
Okay.
And of course, the main reason I transferred because I found a girl that was from Moline that she was traveling by, bus and stuff like that to get to Augustana, and so was I. I'd take 2 buses to get to school when I went there.
Okay.
And we decided it'd be nice to go away from school. Well, we found that Western Illinois was affordable.
Okay.
That was one of the main reasons.
A great reason, yeah.
And so we went there, and then I joined a sorority partly. I was paying most my own way because I had worked for a year before I went to school at all. And so we joined a sorority because it was less expensive than living in the dorm. And we lived in a sorority house, and there's 20 of us. Okay. And so every Sunday, I would say the majority of our 20 girls that lived there would get dressed up to go to church. In those days, you did sort of dress up, and women all wore hats to go to church. And I can remember some Sundays I went with the group that went to Presbyterian church, and some Sundays I went to the one that went to the Catholic church. So they sort of varied between them that way. And that was sort of my life as far as religion goes in that period of time. And I would say our sorority was the kind that would say prayers before lunch and dinner, and we would have meetings, and we would start them with a prayer and maybe end them that way. I don't know if they're still doing that type of thing or not at the present time, but we're talking 1950, early 1950s, because I graduated in 1954.
Okay.
And I ended up teaching school in Davenport, Iowa, in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade art. And shortly after that, I met my husband. My first husband, that is, anyway. And we got married in 1956. And and then he was Roman Catholic, so I changed, and we were married in a Catholic church. And I ended up having a problem when my first son was born. He was baptized. We went to the Catholic church and everything. And then when I was going to have my second child, his mother died during the time before the baby was born, and I don't know what, I never did discuss it with him because you couldn't get him to discuss it. He would quit going to church completely. He wouldn't go to the Catholic church, so my only feeling was he went to church to please his mother. He didn't do a lot to please me. And so I tried to go on my own for a while, but with 2 babies, I say a 4-year-old and a new baby, it was difficult to do. And so I finally gave up also, and went rarely. And then after we were divorced when my kids were about 8 and 12. And a lot of times they would spend maybe the weekend with their dad, and then I would go. I finally decided on the Episcopal Church to find that was sort of a compromise between the Presbyterians and the Catholics, and which I'm not sure how that worked out, but that was one. I seemed to enjoy that church.
But you weren't living in this area.
I was living in Rock Island, Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I met the year after I was divorced, I met my second husband because of a snowstorm. And because we went to, those days, we did a lot of dancing to some of the big band music, and some of that was, a little after that time. And I can remember used to have a fellow I used to meet from Clinton, Iowa, and we'd meet at the dance in Davenport, Iowa. And I remember going that, and it was sort of snowy that night, and this other girlfriend and I would go. And we decided there was snow, but not enough to keep us home. So when we got there, all of a sudden this one fella that was a friend of the friend I met come over, and he says, the snow is really bad up where he lives. He says he's not going to make it tonight. And my thought there was, we weren't serious or anything about anything with that. And I'm thinking, oh, good, I get to dance with other people. And so, guess who I met? That's when I met who became my second husband. And we stayed. In fact, my first thought he was a writer. He wrote letters, and I think that was one reason I got interested in him, because he knew how to spell.
Did he have good handwriting?
And he wrote beautiful letters. I think that was part. I still have quite a few of those left in a box at home. And so 2.5 years after I was divorced, we got married, and he was from the Fox River Grove, Illinois area, and we'd gone on our honeymoon up to Lake Geneva. And so he had to be back at work, I think, that Tuesday. And we got married, of course, on a Saturday, so we only had a few days. And so I'm at his apartment that he had here. He had his apartment in West Chicago at that time. And so I gave him a ride to his work, which is about a good 40 minutes away or so. And I had nothing to do there because I don't know anybody. So I decided to sort of see what was going on around, and I started looking through the phone book, and I saw at school districts, just thinking, gee, well, I wonder if there's, So actually I found, and I thought, gee, I've heard of St. Charles. And so I thought, okay, and I looked at a map and thought, hey, that might be interesting. So I called them and I asked them if they had any openings for schools, for, a school teacher with the kind of credentials I had. And they said, why don't you come over and we'll talk? Well, about 2 hours later, I was offered a contract.
Wow.
And I wasn't sure I wanted it, but I hadn't signed anything yet, so I felt that I could do some more research and find out if I really wanted to.
Sure.
So I remember going to meet Ken for lunch and told him about it and said, well, we'd have to figure it out. So we decided to look for houses and see what that kind of thing was around here. And then we went back to Rock Island where I lived that following weekend. And I'm thinking, oh, should I or shouldn't I? And then I finally got a call from the school district. I had to make up my mind. And so I decided maybe it wouldn't be bad. And then he wouldn't have to make up his mind what he wanted to do about us living, that far apart from each other.
Yeah.
And so he was an Episcopalian, had found out. And we'd been going to Episcopalian churches when we could. And so then they ended up moving to Batavia that summer. It was a very busy summer. I had to sell my house I had in Rock Island and change school districts. And, of course, you want to make sure you got it done before a certain date. I think it was June 30th. If I didn't, I could get sued over not, being available.
Right.
And we moved by August. And so it was a lot of doing. I think now I don't have the energy to do that kind of stuff like that. And then, of course, we moved. We had to find a house here, and we had one. And I remember hauling stuff up in our cars back and forth, too, for that period of time. So I got here about 2 weeks before school started in St. Charles. And then we decided that we would check out the Episcopal churches, Batavia, Geneva, and St. Charles.
Okay.
And so the first one we went to, the one in Batavia, we liked that church, and seemed fine. But next week we decided we'd go to the one in Geneva.
Oh, all right.
And the one in Geneva, we got there and went home and decided that we didn't even need to go to St. Charles because we liked the one in Geneva so well. This became it.
Oh.
And we're talking 1970, end of 1973.
Yes.
Because that was the year we got married
right.
In June of that year.
Okay, and that was before Rick Lobbs, correct? Oh, wow.
I think, was it Lobbs there at that time?
I don't think so.
I think it was just before him or something.
Uh-huh.
And so that's why I have been there ever since.
Wow. And you liked the chapel?
And I loved the chapel. The chapel was all we had there.
Yes.
And the Sunday school was underneath the chapel. And they had a little house there. It was like a little yellow house that was a little bungalow. And I think they'd have meetings there, and I think maybe they had some summer school.
Okay.
Not summer school, but probably that too. But they had some Sunday school there and that type of thing.
Okay.
And we did have the big house in the corner, which is now connected to the church.
Yeah. Right.
But things were different in
So interesting.
1973 to what they are now here.
Right.
But and I've been satisfied with it ever since.
Right. That is a wonderful story.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a couple minutes left. So it's 1973. You found St. Mark's. It's your home. Your grandchildren probably started to come along a few years later, huh?
Yeah,
After
they were
that?
living different places. My older son, when we were living here, I had a hard time getting him to go to Sunday school sometimes. My younger one started going, and he was actually confirmed here,
Okay.
Terry.
Oh, yes.
And now, of course, he ended up going to service when he was 17, and then he got his college degree after that, and he now has a company here that he is president of that he owns, and then his age now, because he's like 63 or something, and he travels back and forth between here and Florida
Okay.
for a while.
Okay.
And he goes to church there, but he married a Roman Catholic. And so he goes to the Catholic Church in Florida at the present time.
Okay.
And his kids were raised in the Catholic Church, but some of them aren't going to church much at all these days, which I pray about quite a bit.
Well, sure. And you've set the example too. I mean, sometimes they don't go and then they start going again. And, you know,
So
there's
I don't
always
know.
something to
Hopefully
pray
they
for.
will. They were all raised that way, but I don't know. Any of my grandchildren are regular church attenders at this point,
Yeah.
and I have now, of course, 9 great-grandchildren.
Yes, I know. That's just
And I try to keep
fabulous.
track of my husband's children's families also.
It's
so
a
it
lot
gets to
of
be-
people to pray for.
Yes, I have a long list
Yep.
of birthdays and anniversaries and all that kind of stuff. I keep at a door of one of my cabinets so can check on them.
Oh, I love that. Okay, thank you. That is the end of part 2.
Thank you for listening to this episode of St. Mark's Episcopal Church, Godcore. If you would like to record one of these episodes and tell your story about how you've experienced God, please use the link in the notes to schedule your time. We look forward to hearing your story, and we hope that you continue to tune in to hear ours. Thank you, and God bless you.